So you're driving down or up 481, you get to choose on your way to work, and something catches your eye. You see down the road, by the side of the road, this single mom, and she's walking, pushing her baby in her stroller on down the sidewalk. She seems like one of those single mothers we often see who can't afford to get a job because the cost of daycare is more than she can bear. And there's something about her that doesn't allow you to take your eyes off her. As you get closer and you're about to pass her by, you make eye contact and you recognize the look on that face. It is a quiet desperation of desperately trying to focus on the task at hand, but you know her mind and her spirit are flooded with questions and worries. How will I find milk for my baby for tomorrow? What will life be like for my baby? If I can't get a job, how can I provide a future for my baby? Oh God, help me. I'm here. And that image, as you drive on through your day, does not leave you. What will life be like for her? Where is she going? Where is she going in life? And where is the church for her? You've stopped at a stoplight and you're on your way to church and you see a teenager. He's got one of those black Sons of Anarchy shirts on. And he's walking towards you and you see his arms have a couple of full-leg tattoos. You don't want to tell your spouse, but you think your spouse, who adds spice to your life. Right? You don't want to tell your spouse that you really think those tattoos are cool. Because your spouse doesn't like tattoos. But they are really, really cool. And the teen has them just set off, so it's just below the wrist, So if he ever gets a real job or a job that has to wear he can hide them. The light turns green and you keep going on down the road to church, but the thought of that teen never leaves your mind. Where is he going? Does he know God? Does he have hope in his life? You're going to church and evidently he's not. God is important to you. That's why you come to church. To worship, to give thanks, to bless others as you feel you have been blessed, to grow. But you keep wondering about that teenager. What does he think about God? How does he learn about God? Does he just learn about God from the internet or some mega pastor on TV? What do his friends think about God? And then you leave and all day this thought keeps burning in your soul. What happened to our church? Why aren't we willing to change the ways we do things to share the gospel in a language maybe that teenager in tattoos would understand? What is he like? What are his hopes and what are his fears? And you think, I love him. There is a balm in Gilead because you remember when you were 14 years old, your mother died. Why, that was 40 years ago. But something about that song was a balm to your grief. But you think, if that kid heard the song, there's a balm in Gilead, he'd never know where Gilead is. And he hears the word balm and you think about one that explodes instead of the one that soothes your fears and your hurts. God, you keep asking, burning in your soul, how can we make a difference for Him? Another time you stop at the C-store like you do most mornings on the way to work, and there at this table is this guy you see every day for the past 2 weeks. He's a little bit disheveled. You see, he has a paper laid out on the table in front of him. It's a classified sections, and he's got his hands wrapped around his cup of coffee like it's communion for him. Like it's the last and only good thing that he thinks is going to happen to him that day. And he's staring out the window, and you know that look because you've been there. Now what am I going to do? The bills are piling up. I wonder, I just have a quarter tank of gas. Is that even going to be enough gas to get me to all of the places where I want to hand in my resumes? And Sue and I have gotten into a lot of fights the last 2 weeks since I've lost my job. I'm trying, but it's so hard. And you know those thoughts because you can read them in his face, and you know that look, and you can't help but ask God, what can I do to help him? You just shut the door on your mom's apartment. At the senior high-rise, you said goodbye. And you're grateful because you know she's really doing good. You say a quick prayer to God standing outside her door and walk on down the hall, and the sound of the TV grows louder and louder as you approach the room. And you get to the room of Mrs. Cuthbert, and you look inside, and there she is in her recliner with the TV on loud so she can hear it, and she's sleeping. And you begin to ask yourself, does anybody love her? You can't get her off her mind as you walk away and resume your daily list of responsibilities. Who loves Mrs. Cuthbert? Does anyone come to see her? If I died, would my mom end up like Mrs. Cuthbert? Where is God for Mrs. Cuthbert? Does anybody love her? Finally, you get the children down for the night, and you decide to take a few moments to turn on the TV for that blessed few moments of mindless entertainment. And you see a news report about children in Sierra Leone who have lost their parents. They're orphans now because their parents have died from Ebola. And those images of those children stay in your mind. You get up, you get ready for bed, you kiss your spouse goodnight, and you pull the covers up over you, but you end up lying on your back because your mind cannot stop burning, thinking about those children. What will happen to the children? What if that were my child? What would that be like? What would happen to my children? What if that happened to us? Who would take care of my children? And what about the children at the church? Is anybody taking care of them? I need to help. I can't let the children go. And so you offer a prayer of gratitude for your children, and you ask God to keep them safe. And you share a prayer for the children on TV, and you ask God to help you see wherever you can help the children at church. And you roll over to get to sleep, but sleep comes very, very hard because you keep asking the same question. God, who is taking care of the children? I need to know. Welcome, my friends, to your burning bush. Your burning bush, my burning bush, is those places in our lives where we hear God beginning to nudge us, to speak us, to make us uncomfortable, to call us forward, and to introduce us to our purpose. Now, remember last week what we called it? We called it a bag, or a bag. B-H-A-G. A big, hairy, audacious, God-given purpose. Or, your purpose is bad, like big, hairy, audacious dream. You ever asked that question, God, what do you want me to do with my life? Or maybe you ask it in a different way as you're done sorting through the laundry and trying to find all the mismatched socks and see if you could match them back up again and do something with the orphans. And you are at work and it's another day of taking the paper out of the inbox, doing what you need to do, and filing it back in the outbox hour after hour, and you find yourself asking, is this all there is? And isn't there something more? I mean, who wants to miss the something more? So Mosier has a burning bush experience too. They just shared it with you. He was born a Jew. He was adopted by the royal family of Egypt. He grew up a prince of Egypt. But he also saw how terribly oppressed and punished the Egyptians treated the Jews. And it stayed with him all of his life, even as he grown up, and even as he grew up, until one day he watched a taskmaster severely punish one of the Jewish slaves, and something tripped inside of Moses, and he killed the taskmaster and ran away to get away. And ends up in Midian, and is in Midian for 40 years. Marries, who does he marry? Is it Zipporah? Did I get that? I should know that. I was hoping Nancy would help me out there. And he works for her father, and he herds sheep, and he goes up, and he's taking the sheep from one good place to another, and all of a sudden his mind, his spirit, his whole attention is captivated by this burning bush that burns and never is consumed. And God speaks to him out of that bush and invites him into his God purpose. You will be with me to help set my people free. And the fairy tale version of the story is Moses goes, "Yeehaw, let's go, God." But that's the fairy tale, isn't it? Because if you read a little bit farther, Moses goes, "Wait a minute, I can't speak well." Or he says, "They won't believe me." And then finally he says, "I'm not qualified." God says, "You are not alone, and I will stay and be with you." So from Moses/Mosier's experience, let me give you some insight into how you open your heart to a God experience and a God purpose. We're going to talk more about this next week as we talk about some other stuff. But here's the first step. Moses saw the bush. God said, "This is what? This is holy ground." And he said, "Take off your sandals or your shoes, for this is holy ground." Do we allow ourselves to be open to those invitations of God for holy places to happen? We live in a highly secularized society where our agendas and our calendars and our expectations are far more dictated by the expectations of culture than the presence of God. In the presence of that, do you stop and look for and allow yourself to be attracted and drawn to holy ground? To be surprised by God. To stop and let God be God. Someone once wrote, "The uncalled life is one in which there is no disruption, there is no redefinition, there is no appearance or utterance of the holy. It's a life listing with emptiness, like a vessel on the water, damaged beyond repair." Now, second thing about moments of the burning bush, when you open your heart to the possibility of God giving you a God-given purpose, is that it so often comes when we're on the way to doing something else. Moses is in Midian for 40 years, and he has fallen into a lifestyle. He's taking the sheep from one area to another, as he's always done, and all of a sudden on the way here, he catches something out of his eye. While he's doing one thing, he's attracted by God somewhere else. And the bush never stops burning, does it? When God's purpose begins to blow up in your life, it will not stop disturbing you. And oftentimes it's related to your life experience. Moses knew his people were suffering. He had seen the genocide of his people. He had witnessed oppression and beating by the Egyptians of the Hebrews. And it has this capacity to break your heart towards the needs of others. So often the burning bush invitation by God comes out of a painful experience from your own life. Great story. I've probably used it before, but I love the illustration. A man has kind of grown cold to God and church and all that kind of stuff. You know, he was on fire. The burning bush was happening, but he's grown cold, and the pastor, sensing that, has gone to visit him, and they're sitting by the fire, and they're watching this raging fire, and they had this conversation about what has happened in his life. Where was his passion? Where was his purpose? Why it had grown cold? And the man kind of laid out a bunch of reasons and excuses that meant something to him, and the conversation kind of went to silence, and they're sitting there before this raging fire, and this ember pops out. Red, hot red, burning bush red, pops out and lands on the cold hearth. And immediately it goes from hot red to black. Cold as black. And the pastor reaches over and takes the tongs and reaches down and takes the ember and places it back into the fire. And it fires back up a bright red, burning bush red. And the gentleman turns to the pastor and says, I'll see you someday. Is that like your life sometimes? Falls out, grows cold. Are you allowing space, holy space, for God to enter in? Are you allowing yourself to be distracted on the way to one thing by something else? And I want to leave you with 3 questions you need to ask when this begins to happen to you. First question: where do you see the greatest needs around you in your neighborhood, your community, and your world? Second question: God, how can I meet those needs? Third question: what gifts do you bring to further that mission? Allow, create, prepare holy sacred space. Let your heart be distracted by the burning bush God is lighting by the side of the road just for you. Let that heart, dislocated and broken, come alive and burn. And then ask the questions. And let God continue to burn a bush in your heart as red and as passionate as you have ever experienced. And like Moses, your life will never be the same. All God's people said, amen.